You know, usually when we talk about a multi-billion-dollar industry, especially one making a massive critical investment, there's this expectation of absolute, almost clinical precision.
Right, like a tech company or something.
Exactly.
Right.
Like engineering or, medicine.
Yeah.
If you break your arm and go to the hospital, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points to the screen and says, there it is. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's binary. It's objective. You don't have, like, 3 doctors standing around a light board debating the philosophy of the bone structure.
Right. I mean, it's either broken or it's not. It's clean. And as an outsider looking in, you naturally expect that exact same level of scientific certainty from the National Football League.
You think so, yeah. Given the money involved.
Exactly. I mean, we are talking about a league that literally embeds microchips into the footballs to measure rotation rates.
Oh, and the biometric tracking devices inside the players' shoulder pads.
Yes. They use those to calculate their real-time miles per hour on a Sunday afternoon. They have, like, launch angles for punts now.
Yeah.
They're completely obsessed with precision.
Which makes sense. I mean, it's comforting to have that data.
Right.
We all like things to be visible and easily categorized.
Especially when an organization is about to risk tens of millions of dollars on a single human being.
Oh, absolutely. But,
Yeah.
well, that's where the illusion kind of breaks down.
It really does, because then you peel back the curtain and you step into the world of the NFL draft, which is, let's be honest, just a highly televised corporate hiring process.
A very strange corporate hiring process.
Extremely strained. And suddenly that beautiful, objective x-ray machine we were talking about is completely broken. We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, well, it's murky, it's chaotic.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. The way the NFL evaluates and hires its most important employees is, historically and even right now, incredibly inefficient. And the closer you look at the mechanics of how they actually gather their information, the more you realize how much of it is built on smoke, mirrors, and just, well, outdated traditions.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are bringing you, yes, you listening right now, into the intricate, high-stakes, and surprisingly dramatic world of NFL Pro Days and the pre-draft evaluation process.
That's quite a rabbit hole.
It really is, and we've been poring over a mountain of material to make sense of this for you. We're looking at localized scouting reports, sports media deep dives from places like Pretty Girls Media, NFL Draft Diamonds, Sportscasting.
And the Film Room remix, don't forget that one.
Right, the Film Room remix, plus insider diaries from former NFL scouts via the National Football Post.
We also have some rigorous scientific breakdowns in there.
Yeah, from Crimson Publishers. And then kind of the crown jewel of our stack today, a completely fascinating 2017 economics thesis out of Skidmore College.
That thesis is incredible because it puts a hard number on just how inefficient this entire draft process really is.
It does. And what's remarkable about pulling all these disparate sources together is that you start to see the same glaring flaws from entirely different angles.
Yeah, like the biomechanist sees the flaw in how a player is asked to jump, but then the economist sees the flaw in how a general manager values that same jump.
Exactly. Our mission today is to stitch all of that together for you. We're going to explore what actually happens at a college pro day and why the biggest stars are suddenly treating the famous NFL Combine like it's optional.
Which is a massive shift.
Huge. We'll also expose the logistical nightmare that smaller school players face just trying to get a foot in the door. We're going to propose some heavy-hitting, data-backed changes to fix the system.
And ultimately, try to figure out why billion-dollar franchises keep making the same basic economic mistakes year after year.
Okay, let's unpack this.
I think to really grasp how strange this ecosystem is, we have to start at the very top of the draft board.
The elite guys.
Exactly. Because before we can talk about the underdog trying to break into the league, we need to understand the power dynamics of the elite players, the guys who already hold all the cards.
Right.
We really need to look at the tension between the NFL Combine and the localized pro day.
Okay, so for anyone who casually follows the sport, the NFL Combine is the big one. It's the main event.
Oh, for sure. The Underwear Olympics.
Right. It started way back in 1982 in Tampa, eventually moved to Indianapolis in 87, and it's always been billed as the ultimate four-day job interview.
Yeah, that's the branding.
You get the top 330 or so college prospects in one building. Every head coach, every general manager, every medical staffer is there.
It's all centralized.
Everyone is running the exact same drills on the same artificial turf under the exact same lights. It's the standardized test.
That is the league's ideal scenario, yes.
Yeah.
A completely controlled, standardized environment. But what the sources are highlighting, and this is a massive recent shift in the balance of power, is that the leverage is moving away from the league.
And back to the players.
Back to the elite players specifically. Top 2025 prospects, guys who are projected to go very early in the draft like Shedder Sanders and Ashton Chanty. They made the incredibly controversial decision to just skip the combine workouts entirely.
They just politely declined.
No thanks, I'll pass.
And they opted strictly to work out at their own individual college pro days instead, which honestly blew my mind a little bit.
Really? Why is that?
Well, if I'm an NFL general manager, right, and I'm about to hand a 22-year-old kid a $30 million guaranteed contract, and he refuses to take the standardized test with everyone else, shouldn't that be a massive, glaring red flag?
You'd think so from a traditional business standpoint.
Right. I mean, it's like refusing to take your driving test at the DMV with the state inspector and instead insisting the instructor comes out to your empty cul-de-sac where your dad is the one holding the stopwatch.
I love that analogy because it perfectly captures the absurdity from the employer's perspective.
That's crazy.
In a purely logical corporate world, refusing the standardized assessment would get your resume thrown straight in the trash. But the NFL isn't a normal corporate world.
Clearly.
The leverage completely flips depending on your college pedigree and your game film. We have to view this through the lens of risk management.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, for a top 5 projected pick, the Combine in Indianapolis offers almost nothing to gain, and quite literally millions of dollars to lose.
Because they're already at the top of the board. I mean, they can't go any higher than number 1 or number 2.
Exactly. Well, let me frame it this way. NFL front offices are notoriously susceptible to overreacting to a single bad data point.
Oh, for sure. Recency bias.
Huge recency bias.
Yeah.
So let's say a top prospect goes to Indianapolis. The turf is a little different than what he's used to. He runs the 3-cone agility drill, he slips, and he posts a bad time.
Or maybe he runs a 4.6-second 40-yard dash instead of the 4.4 he was expected to run.
Right. And the panic sets in immediately. The talking heads on TV start debating his burst, the scouts start second-guessing the tape.
And certainly, he falls from the 5th overall pick to the 15th overall pick.
Yes. And on the NFL rookie wage scale, that drop isn't just a bruised ego. That is a loss of roughly $10 to $15 million in guaranteed contract money.
Wow. Over a fraction of a second.
Over a fraction of a second in a drill performed in spandex. So by skipping Indy and staying on campus for a pro day, the player takes back the control.
Because the pro day is their home turf.
Yeah.
Literally.
It's familiar. You are in your own college weight room. You are working out with your own personal trainers who know exactly how to prep your muscles.
And if you're a quarterback, you are throwing to your own college receivers, right?
Exactly. Receivers whose speed and catch radius you already have perfectly timed out from years of practice. Plus, you control the schedule.
The sources even point out that players can manipulate the testing conditions at a pro day.
Oh, absolutely.
Like they can use favorable timing techniques for the 40-yard dash. It's not the sterile, independent laser timing they use in Indianapolis.
No, it's usually not.
It's often a college coach or a friendly scout with a hand timer, which historically shaves a 1/10 of a second or more off the result.
Right, the infamous fast-track pro days.
Yeah. Plus, skipping the combine in February buys these guys 3 to 4 extra weeks to train or to quietly rehab a nagging ankle injury from November.
It is a calculated, highly rational business decision. They are engineering an environment where it is nearly impossible for them to look bad.
And the general managers just accept this.
They do. They complain about it to the media, sure, but they accept it because they are already sold on the player's game film. The GM just doesn't want to see a bad standardized test score that forces them to go back and defend their draft board to the team owner.
That is wild. So the guys at the very top of the food chain are opting out of Indianapolis purely for comfort, control, and millions in risk mitigation.
Precisely.
But if those top guys are engineering their own reality, what happens to the kid who just wants a chance to be seen? What is the reality for the players who desperately wanted an invite to Indianapolis but never got one?
Ugh.
Well, this is where the narrative shifts from a strategic business decision to a profoundly unfair logistical nightmare.
Because the blind spot here is massive.
It really is.
The sources point out that the 2026 Combine saw guys like North Dakota State wide receiver Bryce Lance run a blazing 4.34-second 40-yard dash.
Incredible time.
Yeah, and running back Jeremiah Love ran a 4.36. They got the invite, they showed out, and they drastically boosted their draft stock. But if we only focus on the Power 5 schools, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Michigans, and the handful of guys lucky enough to get a combine invite, we are missing out on 91.2% of all collegiate football players.
That number, that number should terrify any talent evaluator. A 91.2% blind spot.
It's staggering.
If you were running a tech company and you only interviewed candidates from 3 universities while ignoring 90% of the engineering graduates in the entire country, your board of directors would fire you for gross negligence.
Right. And it's not like the talent isn't there in that 90%. Look at the history of the league. Michael Strahan, Walter Payton, Jerry Rice.
These are Mount Rushmore-level Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
And they all came from historically black colleges and universities, the HBCUs.
Yep. Mississippi Valley State for Rice, Jackson State for Payton.
Exactly. They weren't playing on prime-time national television every Saturday. James Harrison was an undrafted small school player from Kent State who went on to become the NFL Defensive Player of the Year. The talent exists in the margins.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
But for those uninvited players, a pro day isn't a luxury. It isn't a controlled environment to hide their flaws like it is for the top prospects.
Right.
It is quite literally their only shot. It's the one day a year they might get to run or jump in front of someone who holds a clipboard for an NFL team.
Yeah.
And the rules governing how these small school kids can access these pro days are almost comically bureaucratic.
Oh my gosh, the rules. I was reading through the actual league rules provided in the sources, and I had to read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating.
They are very dense.
Here is the setup. If you are a small school player, say Division II or Division III, you are allowed to work out at a big school's pro day as long as it's within your state.
Okay, seems somewhat fair on the surface.
Right. But if a player from a somewhat larger school wants to work out at a major program's pro day, they must be from a school within the host school's contiguous suburbs.
The infamous contiguous suburbs rule.
Yes. And how does the multi-billion-dollar NFL, the league with microchips in the footballs, define what constitutes a contiguous suburb?
You're going to love this.
They use the 2019 Rand McNally Road Atlas.
A physical printed road atlas from several years ago.
I couldn't believe it.
That is the definitive geographical boundary dictating a professional athlete's career opportunities.
It's absurd. I'm just picturing Roger Goodell with a compass and a protractor measuring inches on a map of Texas to see if a linebacker is allowed to run a sprint.
It's a very funny mental image, but the reality is pretty grim.
It really is, because these archaic rules lead to real, tangible heartbreak for these kids. The sources highlight some absolute disasters.
Yeah, the FMU situation.
Let's talk about Florida A&M, FMU. It's a prominent HBCU. The players spent months training. They showed up on the morning of their pro day in the absolute peak physical condition of their lives, ready for the biggest job interview they will ever have.
And 0 scouts showed up.
Not a single NFL representative.
And it wasn't because the players lacked talent.
No.
It was entirely due to administrative failure. The college coaching staff or the administration simply dropped the ball. They failed to properly register the event with the league office in time.
So the scouts just didn't have it on their itineraries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those young men suffered a catastrophic blow to their career prospects because someone in an office forgot to send an email or fill out a form.
That is devastating. And somehow the situation at Texas A&M Commerce makes me even angrier.
Oh, that one is brutal.
According to the sources, the coaches there approved several out-of-state kids to attend their pro day. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a small school prospect. You are broke. You aren't getting NIL money.
Right. You're not getting million-dollar endorsements.
You spend your own dwindling savings on gas. Maybe you sleep in your car to drive across state lines to Texas. You show up at the facility door, and you are turned away.
Because the college coaches had misunderstood the league's complex geographical rules, the Rand McNally rules.
Yes.
The NFL scouts who were inside the building reportedly felt terrible about it, but their hands were tied by league policy. They couldn't let them on the field.
Just turned away at the door. And it's not always just innocent misunderstandings either, is it?
No, unfortunately not.
The sources explicitly note that some major college programs intentionally block small school players from attending their pro days.
Yeah, they hide behind the excuse of a conflict of interest.
Right. But what they actually mean is they are terrified that some hungry, unknown kid from a Division II school is going to walk into their facility, run a faster 40-yard dash, jump 3 inches higher than their own star scholarship player, and steal their draft spot.
It is pure protectionism. The NCAA system historically and aggressively protects its biggest earners.
Of
The
course.
Power 5 schools have a massive vested interest in maintaining their monopoly on NFL draft picks. Because in college football, draft picks translate directly into recruiting power, which translates directly into television revenue.
It's all connected?
Exactly. If an underdog shows up and outshines the five-star recruit, it damages the brand of the big university.
Yeah.
So they just lock the door.
Which creates this unbelievable level of desperation for the small school athlete. I mean, how is an athlete supposed to get a job if the door to the interview is literally bolted shut from the inside?
It's incredibly difficult. And whenever you have extreme desperation in a high-stakes environment, you inevitably invite predators.
Yeah.
The sources point out how this broken system creates a thriving secondary market of uncertified sports agents.
Just preying on these kids.
Exactly. These individuals prey on the anxiety of small school prospects. They promise the world. They claim they have a backdoor connection to get the kid into a closed SEC Pro Day, or they promise to arrange a private, exclusive workout with an NFL general manager.
And I'm guessing they charge a hefty fee for this.
Oh, they charge the athlete whatever little money they have for representation fees, and then they deliver absolutely nothing. The player is left broke and undrafted.
It's a systemic failure. The current localized pro day system favors the highly privileged and actively punishes the marginalized.
That's a great way to summarize it.
So if we all agree the system is completely broken, if the logistics are a nightmare and the testing is unfair, how do we fix it? How do we standardize the stage so that every athlete, regardless of whether they wear a generic helmet or a famous logo, gets a fair evaluation?
The sources offer some very compelling solutions here, both on a macro logistical level and a microscientific level. Let's tackle the logistics first.
Okay, let's do it.
How do we physically get the players in front of the scouts efficiently?
Well, one of the sources proposes what they call the Missouri Western model. I found this fascinating.
It's a really smart idea.
Essentially, instead of every single tiny college hosting its own chaotic, sparsely attended pro day, one central school hosts a massive statewide pro day. They charge a nominal fee to the athletes, just enough to cover the facility costs, insurance, and medical staff, and they open the doors to anyone in the state who meets the basic NFL eligibility rules.
It's elegant because it solves the travel inefficiency for both the players and the NFL personnel. Think about an NFL regional scout covering the Southeast.
Okay.
Instead of driving to 8 different small colleges in Florida over 2 weeks, hoping the weather holds up and the coaches registered the event properly, you put a central pro day right in the middle of the state. Stetson University, for example.
Right.
You guarantee that if a scout flies into Orlando and drives to Stetson, they will see every single draft-eligible player in the state of Florida in one afternoon. The scouts save time and money, and the players guarantee they get eyes on them.
It makes so much sense. But another source takes that idea and scales it up even further.
Yes, the stadium model.
Right. They propose expanding this concept to 8 different NFL stadiums across the country over a 1 to 2 week period in the spring. You map it out geometrically so that travel is, at maximum, a 4 to 6 hour drive for any collegiate player in the United States.
It effectively becomes a series of regional combines. It removes the college programs and their protectionist biases from the equation entirely.
The NFL just takes ownership of their own hiring process.
Exactly. They also suggest expanding the NFL's own reserve camps for players who fall through the cracks, or even establishing 2 distinct NCAA seasons within a single school year to radically increase the amount of game tape available for scouts to evaluate.
Which would be amazing for evaluation, though probably tough on the players' bodies. But okay, so let's say we implement the regional stadium model. We've fixed the logistics.
All right, the easy part is done.
Right. All the players, from Alabama to Slippery Rock, are in the same building. We've solved the who and the where. But the sources from Crimson Publishers make it very clear that getting the players on the field is only half the battle.
Because the testing itself is flawed.
Exactly. Because right now, the actual scientific testing methods we use are embarrassingly outdated.
It's true. The NFL is evaluating bodies worth tens of millions of dollars using technology from the 1980s.
The analogy I kept coming back to is that we are currently measuring the peak athletic capacity of million-dollar athletes with the equivalent of a wooden yardstick.
That's pretty accurate.
Let's talk specifically about the vertical jump. If you've ever watched the Combine or a Pro Day, you've seen the device they use. It's called a Vertec.
Right. For those that haven't seen it, the Vertec is essentially a tall metal pole with a stack of horizontal, color-coded plastic vanes sticking out of the top.
Like little flags.
Yeah, little plastic flags. The athlete stands flat-footed, jumps as high as they possibly can, and swats the vanes away with their hand. The highest displaced vane dictates your vertical jump score.
Which sounds totally fine until you actually think about the mechanics of it. Trying to get an accurate measurement of lower body explosive power by having a guy swat a plastic stick midair is like,
Right.
well, it's like trying to measure someone's height while they are waving their arms on a roller coaster.
It introduces so many unnecessary variables.
Exactly.
The scientific analysis in the sources tears the vertec apart. They point out that swatting the vane relies heavily on an athlete's shoulder range of motion and their hand-eye coordination at the apex of the jump.
Which has nothing to do with leg power.
Nothing. If you have a slightly stiff rotator cuff, or if you just mistime your swat by a fraction of a second, your vertical jump score is artificially lowered. Furthermore, before the jump even happens, an official has to manually calibrate the machine based on the athlete's standing reach.
Oh, right. Because they have to know where to start measuring.
Right. And if that official makes a 1-inch error in setting the baseline, the data is permanently flawed.
So, what is the scientific alternative? The sources vehemently demand a league-wide switch to electronic jump mats or force plates.
Yes, a jump mat or a force plate removes the human error entirely. It's basically a highly sensitive digital scale embedded in the floor.
Okay.
The athlete jumps, and the machine measures the exact amount of force driven into the ground, calculates the velocity, and measures the precise hang time in the air using microswitches.
It measures the actual rocket engine, not just how high the rocket went and whether it managed to hit a plastic target on the way up.
That's a great way to put it.
No swatting, no shoulder flexibility bias, no official eyeballing a standing reach, just pure, objective, lower body explosive power.
And that philosophy needs to extend beyond just jumping. The actual tests themselves need a modern update. Take the standard 225-pound bench press.
Ah, yes.
It's a staple of the NFL Combine. Guys get under the bar and pump out as many reps of 225 pounds as they can.
The meathead classic. Everyone loves the bench press.
Sure, it's great television, but what is it actually measuring? It measures muscular endurance in the chest and triceps. And it heavily favors players with shorter arms because they have a shorter range of motion to lock at the elbows.
So a guy with T-Rex arms looks like Superman.
Exactly. And it tells you very little about a player's functional explosive strength on a football field. The scientific sources suggest replacing it, or supplementing it, with the isometric mid-thigh pull, or the IMTPF.
Okay, I have to admit, when I first read isometric mid-thigh pull, my eyes glazed over a bit. Try to visualize this for me.
Imagine setting up for a standard barbell deadlift. You are bent over, grabbing the bar, and the bar is resting right at your mid-thigh level.
Okay, got it.
But here's the catch. The bar is bolted to the floor or the rack. It is completely immovable.
Wait, so you can't actually lift it?
Right. You get into your power stance, and you pull upward against that immovable bar with absolute maximum effort for a few seconds. That is an isometric contraction. Your muscles are firing at 100% capacity, but your joints aren't moving.
Interesting.
The machine measures your peak isometric force generation.
And why is pulling against a stuck bar a better metric than seeing how much a guy can actually squat or bench?
Because it isolates pure kinetic chain power without the interference of lever length. If you ask a guy with incredibly long legs to do a 1-rep max back squat, his biomechanics put him at a disadvantage compared to a guy with short, stocky legs.
Right, he has farther to go.
Exactly. The IMTPF eliminates that variance. Science shows this peak isometric force is highly correlated with overall weightlifting ability, sprint speed, and the ability to win leverage battles on the line of scrimmage. It is a far better predictor of raw power for an offensive lineman than watching him do an endurance test on the bench press.
They also push for the drop jump, or DJ, which measures the reactive strength index. That's essentially dropping off a small box and immediately rebounding back up as fast as possible, right?
Yes, exactly.
Measuring how quickly your muscles and tendons can absorb force and redirect it. And the medicine ball put to measure upper body explosive power rather than just bench press endurance.
Yes. But here is perhaps the most crucial scientific detail, and it is something that disorganized college pro days mess up all the time. The sequence of the testing matters immensely.
The order they do the drills in?
Right. The National Strength and Conditioning Association, the NSCA, has very strict guidelines on how to run athletic testing.
Because you can't just have guys running around doing drills randomly.
Exactly. You must follow a specific physiological order. You do non-fatiguing tests first, like the vertical jump or the broad jump.
Okay, makes sense.
Then you move to agility drills like the 3-cone. Then you do power endurance tests like the bench press, and you always save the fatiguing tests, specifically the 40-yard full-speed sprint, for last.
Well, that makes intuitive sense. If you make a 300-pound defensive tackle, run a full-speed 40-yard sprint, and then 30 seconds later ask him to do his maximum vertical jump, his legs are going to feel like they're filled with cement.
It's all about the body's energy pathways. A full-speed sprint severely depletes the phosphodent energy system, the ATP, in your muscles.
Right.
The science dictates a strict 3 to 5 minute rest period between maximum effort tests to allow that ATP to resynthesize. If a college coaching staff is rushing to get their pro day over with before lunch, and they force kids to jump immediately after running shuttles, the data they are recording is entirely invalid. It's junk science.
Wow. So even if we fix all of this, let's say we put everyone in an NFL stadium, we use force plates instead of plastic sticks, we pull against immovable bars, and we time the rest periods perfectly. We have flawless, objective, scientific data.
The dream scenario.
It's a dream scenario. It brings us to a really uncomfortable question, though. Will the NFL teams actually use this data correctly?
And that provides the perfect bridge to our next section, the psychology of scouting.
Let's get into it.
Because we've spent all this time talking about the physical metrics, but what is actually happening on the sidelines? When a scout is holding that clipboard, what are they looking for that they couldn't just see on a high-definition college game broadcast?
For this insight, we turn to Jack Bekta. He's a former scout who wrote a fascinating piece for the National Football Post.
His perspective is really grounded.
Yeah, and Besta makes a point that kind of deflates the myth of the pro day workout. He says that the actual physical drills at a pro day rarely make or break a prospect entirely. Instead, they act as a nudge. They nudge a player a few spots up or down the draft board.
It's primarily an exercise in affirmation and confirmation, not discovery. Think about the timeline of an NFL scout.
Okay.
The college football season ends in November or December. It is now late March or early April. A regional scout hasn't seen these players live in months. They've been watching tape in a dark room.
Right, just staring at screens.
Exactly. They already have a preliminary grade on the player. The pro day is about confirming that grade. If a scout is on the fence about a kid's lateral mobility, seeing them move their hips in person just 10 feet away is what gets the scout off that fence.
Bekta also calls it kicking the tires. A regional scout has spent all year building a massive file on a player in their territory. The pro day is usually when that regional scout brings their general manager and their head coach into town.
The heavy hitters.
The big bosses are there, and they aren't there to discover the kid. They are there to sign off on the scout's recommendation.
But the most fascinating aspect of Bekta's insight, and this is where the flawless scientific data hits a human wall, is what he calls the even more factor.
I love this part.
You have to remember, the NFL is a workplace. The locker room is an office. GMs want to know what kind of coworker they are drafting.
Right. The human element. It reminds me of the old corporate interview trick where the CEO takes a job candidate out to lunch, not to ask them about their resume, but to see how they treat the waiter.
It's exactly like that.
The dicta says scouts are watching everything a player does between the drills. How do they interact with their teammates on the sideline? Do they cheer for the walk-on guy who is running the 40-yard dash, or are they sitting on a cooler staring at their phone?
Are they selfish?
Right. Do they follow the drill directions well the first time, or does the defensive line coach have to explain where to stand 3 different times?
They are heavily observing authority dynamics, particularly the relationship between the player and the college strength and conditioning coach.
Why the strength coach specifically?
Think about it. The head coach is busy game planning, but the strength coach is in the weight room with these kids at 5 a.m. in the off-season. They know the player's true character better than anyone.
That makes sense.
Scouts watch that interaction. Do the players respect the strength coach? And when the scout asks the strength coach about the kid, is the coach enthusiastically pounding the table for him? Or is there a subtle, momentary hesitation before they say, yeah, he's a good kid?
That hesitation is a death knell.
It really is.
You can have all the electronic jump mats in the world. You can pull 1,000,000 pounds on the isometric mid-thigh pull. But if an NFL scout notices that you roll your eyes at your college strength coach, or that you act like you are too good to high-five your teammates, your draft stock plummets.
It is also a massive work ethic check. Remember the timeline. The combine is in February. Pro days are in late March. That's a month of downtime. Have they taken their foot off the gas?
Yeah, what have they been doing?
Exactly. The scouts are looking at the player's body composition. Have they gotten soft? Have they been partying? Or are they still in absolute peak physical shape? A pro day tests a young man's self-discipline when the bright lights and national media of Indianapolis aren't shining on them.
The sources include a really revealing anecdote about Jim Harbaugh during his time coaching at Stanford. The Scouts noted that Harbaugh would literally hold court at Stanford's pro days.
Just right in the middle of the field.
Right. He would stand there with all the NFL personnel men gathered around him, and he would provide incredibly honest, detailed, unvarnished evaluations of his own players' pro potential. He wouldn't just sell them, he would tell the Scouts exactly what a player struggled with.
That kind of qualitative data, a trusted head coach giving an honest assessment, is invaluable to a scout.
It's gold.
And it perfectly illustrates the central dichotomy of the pro day. It is this bizarre, unique event because it attempts to blend rigid, quantitative physical testing with highly subjective, qualitative psychological observation.
Right.
You are meticulously measuring a 40-yard dash to the hundredth of a second with a laser, while simultaneously trying to measure a 22-year-old's emotional maturity level based on how he makes eye contact during a water break.
Which brings us to the grand finale of our deep dive. This is where we tie it all together. We have the physical data from the jump mats. We have the psychological scouting reports on how the kid treats his teammates. We have this massive apparatus of localized, highly scrutinized evaluation.
The whole machine.
The ultimate question is, does all of this actually translate to a more economically efficient NFL draft? Do teams actually pick the best players?
For the definitive answer to that, we dive into Arian von Eichen's brilliant 2017 economics thesis from Skidmore College.
Drumroll, please.
And the short, blunt answer is no. The draft is shockingly highly inefficient.
Let's lay the groundwork for why that matters. The NFL uses a reverse order draft. The team with the worst record from the previous year picks first. The team that won the Super Bowl picks last.
Right.
The entire underlying economic theory of the system is competitive balance. It's designed to funnel the best incoming talent to the worst teams so they can eventually dig themselves out of the basement and compete for a championship. It's engineered parity.
But von Eichen's thesis proves that while the theory of competitive balance is sound, the actual execution by the teams is deeply flawed. Now, we have to look at the metrics.
Okay, let's look at the numbers.
Generally speaking, first-round picks do outperform later-round picks over the course of their careers. The thesis uses a metric called Career Approximate Value, or CAREV.
Let's pause and break that down because measuring a single player's value in a chaotic game like football is notoriously difficult. How does CAREV work?
CAREV is a metric developed by Pro Football Reference that attempts to isolate a single player's individual contribution to their team over their entire career, regardless of their position.
Okay.
It takes into account games started, all-pro selections, team offensive or defensive rankings while they were on the field, and normalizes it so you can compare an offensive guard to a wide receiver. It is the best metric we have for answering the question, did this draft pick actually help the team win football games over the next decade?
Okay, so first-round picks generally have a higher average CAREV than seventh-round picks, which means the draft works, right?
On average, yes. But here is the catch. The variance, the standard deviation within those rounds, is massive. You have first-round picks who contribute absolutely zero value, and you have fifth-round picks who become Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
That massive variance indicates systemic, league-wide scouting failures. If the system was efficient, the value would decrease smoothly and predictably with every single pick.
And the biggest culprit behind this failure is what we can call the athleticism trap. NFL front offices chronically, almost pathologically, overvalue the exact combine and pro day athletic numbers we've been talking about, while bizarrely undervaluing actual on-field college production.
The data on wide receivers is the most damning example.
Oh, this blew my mind.
The thesis analyzed years of draft data and found that a 0.1-second improvement in the 40-yard dash bumps a wide receiver up an average of 26 draft slots.
Wait, I need to make sure I'm wrapping my head around that. 26 draft slots. That is nearly an entire round of the draft.
Almost a full 32 picks.
That is the difference between being picked in the middle of the first round, signing a fully guaranteed 4-year deal for $15 million, and dropping to the middle of the second round where your guaranteed money is slashed by 60%. All based on 1/10 of a second. A literal blink of an eye.
Precisely. The financial reward for that 10th of a second is astronomical. Yet when von Eichen looked at the longitudinal data, looking back at those receivers after they played their careers, he found that 40-yard dash times have absolutely no significant correlation to a wide receiver's actual NFL career value, their CAREV.
None at all.
None. Think about that. Teams are paying millions of dollars and burning premium draft capital for a metric that does not predict professional success.
It's like paying double for a car because it has a really shiny paint job, even though the mechanic told you the engine is average.
Exactly.
And it gets even crazier when you look at quarterbacks. It's the most important position in all of sports. Teams regularly draft quarterbacks higher based on their Wonderlic intelligence test scores, their 40-yard dash times, and their broad jumps.
And guess what the thesis found? None of those three metrics correlate to future NFL success for a quarterback. The Wonderlic is meaningless for predicting passing efficiency.
Wow.
A quarterback's broad jump has zero bearing on his ability to read a disguised cover 2 defense. Look at the historical anomalies. Tom Brady famously had an awful, slow, awkward combine. Drew Brees is not a physical marvel. He has a remarkably average athletic profile.
So if the stopwatch and the measuring tape don't predict quarterback success, what does?
The thesis identifies two actual predictors of success that teams chronically ignore. The first is college completion percentage. Did the guy actually throw the ball accurately when live defenders were trying to tackle him?
This seems pretty straightforward.
You'd think so. The second is a metric called DRAGE, or draft age.
Draft age? So how old they are when they get drafted? Why does that matter so much?
It comes down to neuroplasticity and physical development ceilings. If a 21-year-old rookie throws for 3,000 yards in college, and a 24-year-old rookie throws for 3,000 yards, they are not the same prospect.
Oh, because the 24-year-old is older.
Right, the 21-year-old is doing it while still physically and mentally maturing. They have room to grow. The 24-year-old is essentially a fully formed adult playing against 19-year-olds in college.
So they might just be bullying younger kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When they hit the NFL, the 24-year-old has very little developmental ceiling left. Yet, teams consistently ignore draft age in favor of how far a guy can jump from a standing position.
And it isn't just the glamorous skill positions making these errors. For tight ends and defensive ends, the thesis found that teams actually, bizarrely, penalize players in the draft order for having long broad jumps or high college yards per catch.
It makes absolutely no sense.
It really doesn't. The logic models these multi-million-dollar analytics departments are using are profoundly flawed. They are plugging bad variables into the equation.
We also see a massive top 25 bias, which circles us all the way back to the beginning of our conversation.
The big schools versus small schools.
Exactly. The economic data shows that teams heavily overvalue players coming from established top 25 college programs. GMs assume the success of the Alabama or Ohio State program inherently translates to the individual player.
Right.
In doing so, they simultaneously ignore identical or even superior athletic and production profiles from small school players.
Which brings us right back to our small school guys getting locked out of the pro days. The bias isn't just an accident. It is baked into the economics of the league. And when you bring in advanced analytics like Pro Football Focus, the truth is completely laid bare.
Yes, the PFF data is the smoking gun here. Pro Football Focus grades every single player on every single snap of the NFL season. It's incredibly granular data.
So it's not just basic stats, it's play-by-play execution.
Exactly. And their data shows that once players are actually on the NFL field, the drop-off in actual performance between a first-round pick and a fourth to seventh-round pick is surprisingly minimal.
That is wild. It proves that the later round guys, those small school kids who had to fight through the bureaucratic nightmare just to get a workout, actually have the talent to compete at the exact same level as the first rounders if they're merely given the opportunity to get on the field.
The talent gap is a myth perpetuated by the draft position.
So we have to ask the ultimate question. Why? Why do billion-dollar franchises, owned by some of the most ruthless, success-driven businessmen on Earth, with entire floors of analytics departments, keep making the same basic economic mistakes year after year? Why do they keep falling into the athleticism trap?
To understand that, we have to step away from sports and look at the economic concepts of statistical discrimination and option value.
Okay.
You have to remember what an NFL general manager is prioritizing above all else. It isn't just winning games, it is job security.
Right.
GMs are incredibly risk-averse.
Right. They have mortgages, they have kids in private school, they want to keep their high-paying jobs.
Exactly. Think about the dynamics of the draft room. If a GM drafts a blazing fast wide receiver from Alabama in the first round, a guy who ran a 4.3 at the combine and played on national TV, and that player turns out to be a complete bust in the NFL, what happens to the GM?
Everyone just shrugs.
Yes. The GM can face the billionaire owner. They can face the angry sports radio media and say, look, he was fast. He played in the SEC. Every draft expert on ESPN had him rated as a top 10 pick. It was just bad luck. He didn't adjust to the playbook.
The GM gets a pass. But let's reverse it. What if that same GM uses a first-round pick to draft a slightly slower guy who had incredible college production at Florida A&M, and that player busts?
The GM gets fired.
Yeah.
The media eviscerates them. The owner calls them incompetent for taking a risk on an unknown.
Oh.
Drafting the big school athlete with the flashy 40-yard dash time is essentially an insurance policy. It is a shield against criticism. It is statistical discrimination. The executives are making hiring decisions based on what protects their own careers and aligns with consensus media opinions, rather than what the objective data actually says will win football games. It's about self-preservation, not draft efficiency.
Nobody gets fired for buying IBM. That's the old corporate saying, right? Nobody gets fired for drafting the fast guy from Alabama. It all comes back to self-preservation. And, as we wrap this up, I want you listening to remember that this isn't just about football. It really isn't. The NFL is just a highly visible microcosm. This is about how massive institutions, all of them, identify and acquire talent.
It's universal. Whether you were talking about the NFL draft or corporate hiring on Wall Street or the college admissions process, systems are inherently built to favor the known commodity over the hidden gem.
Human bias, the desire for comfort, the need for career safety will almost always override raw objective data. We see the 4.3 speed on the stopwatch, we see the prestigious university logo on the resume, and we just stop looking for the truth. We assume the packaging is the product.
It takes a very brave organization to ignore the noise and trust the deeper metrics.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over today. We've talked about human bias, the flaws of the handheld stopwatch, the psychological weight of high-fiving a strength coach, and the absolute absurdity of using a 2019 road atlas to determine a young man's future.
We covered a lot.
We did. But if the NFL draft is this economically inefficient simply because human scouts and GMs get easily seduced by a fast 40-yard dash in spandex, what happens when AI fully takes over scouting?
Oh, man. That is the inevitable horizon, isn't it? The technology is already there.
It is. Think about it. If machine learning algorithms can watch Saturday college game broadcasts and instantly track in-game speed in full pads, calculate biomechanical efficiency on a tackle, and measure a quarterback's real-time processing power without any human bias, will the traditional pro day even exist in 10 years?
That's a great question.
Will the stopwatches, the jump mats, and the entire spectacle of the NFL Combine eventually become entirely obsolete?
If the algorithms can prove they predict care of better than a regional scout, the owners will absolutely demand the switch. We might just get that clean, objective X-ray after all.
Pointing right at the jagged white line with no debate. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us today. We'll see you next time.